Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Success After Trauma, where we bring on special guests that have had a journey of their own, overcome this journey, and found modalities or processes and ways in which they have a desire to serve others. Today's special guest is Cavalyn Day. Calvalyn is a coach and a consultant working with people that have what she calls, and I love, hand-me-down trauma. Hand-me-down trauma is those things that we get from our parents, and we might not even realize it on both sides. And what we mean by on both sides are what Calvalyn, forgive me, everyone, forgive me, Calvalyn. What Calvalyn is implying on both sides is the child does not realize what they receive from the parents sometimes. And then Calvalyn makes a point that she had great parents. Oh yeah, but there was certain limiting beliefs and things that were still installed because we don't know what we don't know sometimes.
Absolutely.
Calvalyn, I'm really excited to have you on here and share. This is something I'm very passionate about myself, and I love sharing. Tell us a little bit about how did you get started in coaching?
That's such a good question. So my background, I have a very I took the scenic route to coaching. So I've had several careers, but I started off initially wanting to be in psychology, took a long detoured path and ended up back at school counseling and working as a school counselor. Really wanted to connect in a different way and found coaching. Would have never known that coaching existed prior to that, but afterwards it's like, this is the modality for me.
That's awesome. So once that was ignited, what did you, well, actually, let's take it back. Let's go back a little bit. We got to back up a little bit. If you can remember what created the passion in psychology as a whole? Obviously you were always, the coaching piece was always there. And I love how you called it, you took the scenic route, finding it. What was the passion, if you can remember, just to really understand psychology at a different level?
Yeah, so I'm a preacher's kid, and growing up in the church, seeing my parents kind of do missionary work and service work, and we weren't just like a Sunday kind of preacher's family. It was a daily activity for us. So we were always seeing people in various stages of, now I know, trauma, recovery from trauma, what have you,
Mm.
and trying to like I would find myself exploring them, trying to figure out who was what, and really just curious about the way that their minds worked. And had never experienced counseling at that point that I decided to get into psychology, but was just really curious about the human experience, people's personality, and how that impacts the way that they do things in their life.
Wow. That's powerful. So once you realize that, take us through a little bit, if you will, the what did the different career paths look like along the way?
You're not going to believe this, Greg.
Let's hear it. Let's hear it.
So I went to college for a year, decided I wanted to get married, and I was a teen mom. So I wanted to expand my family and do the whole kind of, wife and mother thing. So I went back and got a cosmetology license. So I was a hairdresser for several years. Put myself while I was doing hairdressing, I put myself through X-ray school because I wanted to step up in income. So I was able to be an X-ray tech. So that made me more money, which was great, but it didn't give me any of the pieces that I really wanted, which was like behind the chair, like a little bit of that psychology background. You're having conversations, people are telling you all their problems, but in X-ray, I wasn't necessarily getting that. And so worked as an X-ray tech and then put myself back through school to finish my bachelor's degree and then my master's degree. And that's how I got into school counseling.
Wow. So you did bachelor's and master's. Congratulations, by the way. That's no easy feat. Obviously, you were dedicated to it. When you were doing masters, you got done your masters. What was your thought in going to school counseling? What
Yeah,
triggered
so,
that? What created the
so I
excitement?
would say the biggest thing was I was looking for, like, how can I serve in a way that also allows me to have the lifestyle that I wanted? So I wanted to be home with my kids, during their nights and their weekends. And my vision of school counseling is a lot different than what it actually is in practice. So I wanted to be having those conversations with the kids, connecting with their families, helping them to grow and develop In practice, a lot of times you end up doing more of the testing duties and attendance monitoring and things like that. So I found ways to connect with people while I was working as a school counselor, but it definitely wasn't, it's not exactly the way that I pictured it.
So take us, okay. I can imagine that, and I think as a society, I think this is my opinion, my belief, we're doing a little bit better. But when we back up, it's crazy to think that it's like we checked about, yep, we put a counselor in the school, but then we used them for all these auxiliary tasks,
Yeah.
because we just didn't value as a society, as a whole, we just didn't value mental health and awareness, and we just didn't value it the same. But I think we're making we're making leaps and bounds in modern day. But that's crazy to hear. Like, yeah, as a counselor, I made sure people were attending school. Like, wow. Okay, so now take at some point in time while you're doing this, you have that realization, like there's some type of quality of life here, but my purpose, my passion is not being met and fulfilled. Um, how did you start having that realization? What did that look like?
So it's a really good story. So I personally am kind of drawn to those troubled kids, the kids who kind of get into trouble, the ones that have bad behaviors, those kind of things. And I have just a way, and I think part of it was because I was a preacher's kid, and that's what we did when I was, like it was natural, right? So it was something I was doing all of my life. So I was having a meeting with one of those kids that was kind of in a little bit of trouble. His mom ended up, and I think that was honestly, his mom had adopted him from the foster care system. So he had a strong history of trauma, honestly. And then a teacher, and it was a great teacher. And there was a little bit of a conflict between the student and the teacher. Teacher was totally wanting this conversation. And I helped facilitate a conversation between the student and the teacher. And the mom looked at me when the student went back to class and the teacher went back to class. She said, "How did you do that?" And I'm kind of like, what did I do?
Right.
She's like, "I can't ever get him to understand, like when I'm trying to have these conversations with him." She's like, "I try to get him to understand these things." And she's like, "I just can't talk to him like that." And it was really clear to me that this was a woman who loved her son. Was a good person. She'd gone out of her way to adopt a child through the foster care system. She knew she'd been trained as a foster parent. So she had all these different things that she had experienced, but yet she was struggling with what I felt was something super, super basic, which was communicating with her child. I thought, who's helping those kind of parents? It's not necessarily therapy because there's not a diagnosis there necessarily, but there's some skills that she needs that she wants to be able to apply that would greatly improve the quality of her life, the outcomes for her son. And I thought, there's got to be a space in there. And that's really what got me thinking, like, could I do this, or is that possible? And that's really the beginning of how my business started.
Take me, if you could walk us through a little bit. So from there, how does it evolve? Paint a little bit of a picture for us. How does that evolve so obviously that, like, the fire's lit now. We're like, whoa, this is a thing. How does that grow into what it is today?
So it started with, okay, I'm putting on my shingle. I'm a coach now. So
Yeah.
what do I do? So since I had a master's degree, I was able to coach, even though I wasn't certified in coaching. But I didn't have like a framework or a structure. So I started kind of working through counseling offices, like, hey, if you have parents who want coaching, I can provide some coaching. It's not therapy, but I will help them to develop these skills. And then around this, and this was some years ago, but around that time, it's like, if you want to be a coach, you got to have a blog. You got to be blogging so that people can find you. You got to put out the free content. So then I developed my blog and I started writing, and I realized, like, I really love sharing and translating information. So that's when I started to write. So I was doing more writing. When you start to write and you're, promoting books and things of that nature, now you're speaking. So now I'm speaking and I'm going and I'm doing the conference circuit. And then from the conference circuit, people are like, "I loved your training. Can you do that for me at my school? Can you do that for me at my organization? Can you, your training was the best one of the entire conference. I want to bring you to my district." And it really grew like super duper organically, honestly. And then, over time, obviously you have repeat customers and they're like, you did this for us, now you want to do this. And then I really just started to say, like, doing the training is great, but you asked me for a training. I think you need more than a training. I think you need some additional support. So then as I would come in and do the consultation piece, now I'm assessing your organization and I'm identifying all those trouble spots so that we can make a real comprehensive plan about how to decrease your turnover, right? If you're working with, I've worked with organizations like Head Start organizations. And so while they stand in the gap for families that are below the poverty line, a lot of their staff members are just above the poverty line, or have history of being below the poverty line themselves. So that's a certain type of, we're trying to develop these professional skills. We want them to be, 10 steps ahead of the clients that they're serving so that they can, give them this roadway. They need that personal development, that professional development. So that's when the consultation piece started in, and it just kind of really has bloomed from there. And so it's been very organic, but just every next step, just being willing to take that next step.
That's powerful. So I want to dive back into when you were writing. Have you, it sounds like, but I'm looking for validation. Have you already written and completed books, or a book or books? Yeah. Okay. Tell us a little bit about what's the first book how many books have you written?
So there's several, but the two most popular is, the first one is Drag 'em Kicking and Screaming, which is about working with at-risk kids.
And can we hold on? Can we say it was dragon kicking and screaming?
So it's drag
Drag them.
English there, drag kicking and screaming.
Okay.
So it's about at-risk student success. So helping teachers, counselors, social workers connect with, reach, and teach kids of all backgrounds. And then the second one is called Authentically Engaged Families. And that one is about creating family engagement programs. So if you have daycare centers, before and after school programs, educational centers, school districts, if you need to connect with families and reach and teach them, that book gives you a framework for doing that in an appropriate way.
Wow. So the first book you wrote, where are both these books? If people wanted to purchase them and dive in, where is the most popular places they're listed?
Amazon.
Okay, perfect.
You can get them through my website, but the easiest place is Amazon.
Beautiful. So, okay, so you write the first book. Now take me through. I'm just in the midst of writing my first book. We're probably about, I say in the midst, we're wrapping up towards the end. My goal is to release next month.
Awesome.
Super excited. So I'm definitely intrigued to hear about this from you. When you first released that book, what was how did that, I know you had a lot of organic traction when you first released it. Tell me a little bit about how that book takes flight. How does that, yeah.
Yeah, so you're asking some really good questions because these are stories that don't come up all the time anymore. So this book I actually co-authored with my sister and brother-in-law. So we've all been in the education space for lots of years. And so my sister had this idea about, obviously growing up as preachers' kids and the way that my mother and father kind of, would drag kids to church and just by any means necessary, we're going to get you over this threshold into heaven at some point, right? So that background we really brought to the education space and realized that a lot of people didn't have that. So over Thanksgiving dinner one day, we're having this conversation. And so we start, as we're kind of ramping up to the Thanksgiving holidays, we were like, let's do this, let's get it done. So we literally had Thanksgiving dinner. And that night we were editing the book and writing the book and putting the pieces together. And we put it out for pre-sale. Probably, I think it was released maybe sometime around December 1st or something. And that's literally how we got it going. And we started, as we released it, we were kind of going, making the circuit and speaking as we were speaking. And then we would go to the different schools. As I would go to schools, I say, hey, I'm going to come in and train you. I think you should grab copies of my book. And so I would sell the books right along with my speaking engagements or my, consultative services. And it really got people to they walked away with something that wasn't a bunch of theory. I think educators are constantly got theory crammed down their throats. This is why you should do this. This is why you should do that. Great. But when I'm standing in front of 35 kids, what am I supposed to say? How am I supposed to get them to see me as not a threat, to see me as somebody who actually cares? Like, what can I do in really practical, tangible ways? And so because the book was so simple and so easy to read, people really resonated with it in that way. We've actually had we had a transportation department bought it for all their bus drivers to read. So it's those kind of things. People really like it because it's fun and it's quick and it gives you those like, oh, I am going to try that quick way to say like, I can make this work for me.
Wow. So once that book, you realize like people got it in their hands, and you guys figured out. I mean, that I'm taking a quick note here. You guys figured it out when you hit the nail on the head. I've read a lot of books. What's a lot? I'm not sure, but for me, it's been, I don't know. I think we're definitely into the thousands in the last decade. And you're right. A lot of their theory, and you get down, and you're like, yeah, I align with that in theory, but what do I do about it?
Yeah.
You guys figured that piece out, obviously, and once you put it in people's hands, it sounds like you were getting the feedback that this is real. I mean, if you weren't getting the verbal feedback, you were getting the sales feedback. People buying it for their entire fleet. Where did the spark for the next book come?
So that one they actually approached me about. So I wasn't really planning to write a book about family engagement, but I had written a blog post. I was doing a guest blog post for Corwin Press at the time. And again, it was one of those things like, I love that you're talking about the theory of parent and family engagement, but what I see in the schools is bake sales. So I need something else. Like, what do you do when the parents don't answer the phone? Okay, well, you try a different way. Maybe their phone is turned off because they don't have any minutes on their phone, or maybe they've got to save the minutes on their phone for them getting called into work. So they're not going to answer for you to tell them that they should be bringing their kids to school. So you got to, try some different things. So I wrote that blog post, and they said, your blog post was super popular. How would you like to write a book? I thought this is the strangest thing ever. But they liked the blog post, they liked the perspective. And I think that's one of the things that I appreciate. And it's probably one of like I don't want to call it a perk of trauma, but sometimes we talk about all the negative parts of our story, especially the hard things that have happened. But my perspective is influenced by every experience that I've had, by the experiences that my parents passed down to me. And so one of the perks is that I do have a perspective that is different than someone who had the picket fence and the perfect childhood. I do have that different perspective. So they loved that perspective. And so I spent an entire summer writing the book and realized that it's much harder, or I don't know, maybe harder is not the word, it's much more complicated to write a book for a publishing house than it is when you just decide to self-publish. So I finished the book one summer, and probably like, maybe 60 days I gave myself to get it done. And it didn't come out until the next year. So you finish it and it's just kind of sitting there, but you go through the editing process and all of the promotion process, and they have it reviewed and they want to get the feedback and all these different things. But it went well. And I'm grateful that has also opened some opportunities for me as well.
That's powerful. So then when that book came out, tell me a little, how was that book received once that launched? One's go ahead.
It's done well, and it continued. The great thing about when obviously when you work with the publishing company is that you get those royalty checks that come in periodically and remind you that the work that you did is good. But I think the great thing about that is because it was for a national like a national publisher, and one that's well respected in the education world. I mean, I was able to be booked on keynotes then. So people are flying me out to do their keynote speech. And it's like, you probably never would have found little old me in Zionsville, Indiana, had it not been for this book. So it was an opportunity, and it really did open the doors.
So once you started getting on the speaker circuit, being a keynote, Tell me a little bit of, I mean, I have to assume exciting, but tell me a little bit about that journey from how you experienced it internally and then also what you experienced externally as well.
Yeah, so I think the biggest challenge is it happened, it wasn't an overnight success, obviously. And it happened at
Mhm.
such a pace that sometimes I really have done things and I'm like, oh, wow, I did do that. And there's almost like, oh, I just kind of forgot about that. Oh, I did do that too. So because it was, while I was still, I built my business honestly while I was still working. And I'm a mother of four, so I'm still raising my kids and I'm doing all these different things. So internally, I think that sometimes I wasn't even fully present for some of the things that I had experienced. Just kind of going through and like if an opportunity presented itself, yep, this is the right, I knew in my gut that it was the right direction. So I just kept moving forward.
Mhm.
But what I got, I think one of the best parts of what I got externally was because of my perspective, people were, like they were refreshed by
Mm.
my engagement. And that is what I live for. As much as an introvert as I am, I really love for people having those aha moments of, oh my God, this makes so much sense. I want to try this. So getting that feedback is perfect for me. Now, I'll be exhausted when I go home, but in the moment, I really live for that feedback.
I love that you talked about that. I heard like this recent, which I felt congruent with it for a while, but it seems I've heard it recently. Maybe it even sounds trendy. That people say, well, oh yeah, that's a introverted extrovert or an extroverted introvert. I've always been of the belief, so I'm an introvert myself, and I love going out to share my energy until my battery is drained. I think what
Absolutely.
most people don't realize with introverts is not that we don't like sharing our energy, it's that we have to recharge alone.
100%.
I'm definitely of the same. Like once the battery's full, oh, I got to go give it to everyone else. When the battery's empty, I don't want to go to hang out to recharge. I want to be by myself to recharge.
Absolutely. That is
I,
100% the difference. Yeah. After a
I
good speaking engagement, I'm home watching Little House on the Prairie in my pajamas. I don't need to talk to anybody. I might
yeah,
a
yeah.
little bit, but that's it. But when I'm on, I'm 100% on. Yeah.
That's powerful. So on the speaking circuit, now from there up until this point, are you doing how much, if so, and are you doing consulting and coaching up to this point? Okay, how
Yeah, so
much?
I
What
would
does
say
that
I
look
was,
like?
was definitely probably just a little bit of the consulting, more of the coaching.
Okay, so you're coaching pretty heavily at this point. Second book's out on the speaking circuit. How does consulting? I mean, I can imagine, but take me a little bit through how consulting takes off and then where that goes from there.
Yeah, so consulting is what allowed me to walk away from my job, and be able to stabilize financially in a different way. So um, really, it started with those small kind of one-off speaking engagements, and just realized. And I think I didn't have a background in business. Even when you go to school for psychology, psychiatry, any of these, they don't teach you how to build a business. They teach you how to help people, but they don't assume that you have any background in business or that you have any desire to work for yourself. So I didn't structure any of the things that I did to be fiscally responsible. It was just like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to take me X amount of hours to prepare for this. It's going to take me X amount of hours to deliver it. That's what I'm charging. But that's when I had to start to really develop those business skills. And as I'm looking at what's the best structure for my business, it's
Mm.
not going to be those one-off speaking engagements. It's really about the impact that I can make. And I realized like people enjoy my speaking, they enjoy reading a book, but they want support with the application of that book or those
Mm-hmm.
concepts.
Mm-hmm.
And so looking for another way to say, hey, we can take this and amplify the impact. That's when I really started to offer the consulting as a a kind of an add-on service.
Yeah.
Um, and I had people say like, huh, she's really good. People really like her. They really resonate with her. They're willing to, at least try the strategies that she suggests. So that was really how that developed.
That's powerful. And so now, where is in relation to so once consulting took off, coaching took a back seat. Is that correct? Okay. And then consulting takes off. Now, from that point, how many more books have you written since then, and what has evolved from then till now?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple. So I've got a couple workbooks out, and I've got another book called Get Teens Talking, which is really just it's a very simple book, kind of like Drag 'em Kicking and Screaming. That's just more specifically for parents of teens. So that book I put specifically on Amazon, and they do like print on demand for that as well. So that one was like the easiest probably of all the books to write, because I said, I'm no longer printing these books. Amazon print on demand is the way to go. So that's been the easiest part there. But yeah, coaching definitely, I would say, took a backseat, because when you're part of consulting is you're really embedding yourself in the organization. You're putting your finger on the pulse of the organization. You are really assessing at a high level, but then also getting right in there to give that feedback about what needs to change. So coaching definitely took a back seat to that. And I look forward to those opportunities when I still get to have that one-on-one conversation, which is not as much anymore, but I still really enjoy those. But that has allowed me to really, the impact that I'm able to have, I think is much higher now.
Well, and ultimately, I mean, you're the label is consulting. It is consulting. What you're doing is coaching, and instead of
Right,
an individual, you're coaching an organization.
right.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so tell us a little bit. What in? I'm sure you'll have your own your confidentialities, but what genre of businesses are most attracted to you, and you attract it to them?
So this is what I say: mission-driven, million-dollar organizations. Those are my bread and butter. So they have lots of nonprofits with a high operating budget, where they really they need to have an impact, right? In order to keep the funding coming in, they have to be able to show results. And they have great people with big hearts on their staff. So they really want to do good work. And a lot of times the people that they are in the helping professions, they don't necessarily have a lot of business background. They don't necessarily have, they might be conflict averse, and some of those different things. And up until the last, I'm going to say 5 years, 5 or 6 years, people weren't learning about trauma. So when I
Mm,
was having these conversations about, like, hey, I think what you're actually having is a trauma response. And
mm-hmm.
they're like, well, haven't been to war. I haven't, lost my house. Like, I'm like, well, you
Yeah.
were chronically poor as a child, and chronic poverty does, show up as a trauma in ourselves. And they're like, whoa. So they really weren't aware of this at all. And now, post COVID, we're having lots more of these conversations. But prior to that, people really weren't having these conversations. They didn't have language around it. So they wanted to fulfill their mission. They had, stakeholders that were saying, you better fulfill your mission, and they needed to figure out how to do it.
I love what you said there around, and again, we're starting to see it and a lot. That we still got a lot of ground to cover. We're starting to see a lot, like you said, verbiage around what's going on, concepts, theories, and even people starting to understand that how trauma. I love what you said, and I say sometimes I'm a veteran myself. I did serve in the Iraq War 3 times, and I say that a lot of times veterans don't have the monopoly on PTSD.
Yeah.
And veterans never claimed it. They've never done anything wrong. But a lot of people think, and you said it, well, I've never been to war. This did, I wasn't in nothing. I didn't have a major. And sometimes trauma can be as small as, and this is just hypothetical, but also something that could be. Trauma could have been a child being told, hey, be patient, hold it, let them go first. You have to wait. And then they're 35 and they want to launch a business, but they're being patient and they're waiting and they're letting everyone else, all their friends, go first.
Yeah.
And it's wild that trauma has this, the label trauma has this thought of like, no, that's not me, unless it was something really big.
Mhm.
Um, you know, maybe in the future we'll come up with a label that's more digestible for people. I'm not sure, but
Yeah.
I love that you bring light to all these hand-me-down traumas.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
How'd you come up with that term, by the way?
So the technical term is probably generational trauma.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
People like that, you know, it's easy enough to say, but I think what truly it really is hand me down. Like if you're a younger sibling, you know about hand me down. Um, and sometimes those are good things, right? You know you love to get the clothes that are not worn out or what have you, but sometimes you get some stuff and you're like, that's ugly, or that's barely got any life left. But truly, I think it just came to me because I grew up in a family where we did have hand-me-downs. But I wanted to have language for the people who love their parents, grandparents, extended family members, even those who would say like, there's some things about them that I don't like. But when they realize that they were great parents, but they didn't give me this, or they instead gave me this, and this thing really doesn't, serve me well. Those
Mm,
beliefs, those
mm,
patterns of behavior. For example, my parents were hard workers, right? And so for a long time, my identity was I needed to be a hard worker.
mm,
Which what's wrong with that, right? That's not a negative thing, but maybe money can come to me easily and
mhm,
effortlessly.
mhm,
But in order for me to not repel that, I have to stop believing that I have to be a hard worker. I have to not be resistant or, even repel, easy money, because money could be easy. But that wasn't something that my parents, whose parents were sharecroppers, who were living in the rural South in Tennessee, that wasn't something that they could give me. So this idea that there's not enough to go around,
mhm,
that was ingrained in me as a hand-me-down trauma. But it wasn't because my parents were bad. They were trying to prepare me for the world. So I needed a word for that, that people could resonate with, that didn't feel like I'm shaming my parents or guilting my parents, because they didn't blame them, but it is their experience.
that is so powerful. That is so powerful. Um, yeah, yeah, I'm like, whoo. Um, that I love how you shine light on, and how many people are listening right now, for all of you that are listening. I mean, I know you just a chord was just struck. I mean, I think you should respect your parents. I think this is a valuable thing to do. And I love how you shine light on, it's almost like we don't want to unpack this because we don't want to shame our parents.
Oh
We don't
yeah.
have to shame our parents. Go ahead, tell us.
But that is so true. That is exactly what you said there is exactly right. They're not ready to unpack it because they're afraid of what that's going to mean. And I think that's one of the spaces where I think coaching and therapy work really, really well together, right? So as we're walking forward, sometimes you're walking backwards with your therapist, and we kind of are working together, and you're able to create this life that really makes sense for you. Sometimes people start with coaching because they're not willing to go back. And then as we go a little bit further, then they're willing to
Mhm.
finally dive in. So I think in other parts of the world, coaching and therapy work so well together. The United States has been super slow about this, but they are
Mhm.
coming around.
Mhm.
I think this is one of the places where it really can work well together, where you can have your therapist and a coach, and you can craft a life that you actually want to live as you do that work on both sides.
That's powerful. And once, um, sh- can you share your words around once that internal? I like to suggest that internal congruency, the conscious, the unconscious mind, the trauma. This is just my projections, my suggestions. Our trauma exists in our unconscious because our trauma exists in our memories, and our memories exist in our unconscious. So the unconscious has certain programs and beliefs, and then consciously we think that we have adopted new beliefs and such. But until we clear once we have alignment with the two, once we have congruency, um, what has been your experience for what that creates
Yeah, so
for
that's
for the for the for the for the people going through the
Yeah,
process?
that's my favorite space, first of all, is when those two things kind of line up. Because that's when I think you get the flow, right? Which is the core of
Mm,
who you are is
mm,
able to be expressed outwardly, right? What I see a lot of times, what kind of brings people to the coaching space or even, to the counseling space is there's like this internal battle, right? And it's because you aren't dealing with what is there. And as you kind of, you're back and you're forth, you're almost like, I'm gonna jump in, but not quite. Once you're fully, no, this is the work that needs to be done. I'm willing to do it. The world opens up. It really is like, you'll hear the angels kind of sing. It's like monumental. And that doesn't mean it becomes like super duper easy, but things begin to feel like they're moving in the right direction. So a lot of my clients, like the individual clients that I work with, they feel stuck then when they come in. They're like, I just feel stuck, like I can't move forward, like I've been reliving the Groundhog Day over and over again. It's because you're not willing to deal with that thing, or, are you willing to release the thing that got you here that won't get you there, right? Like that piece of the puzzle. You were able to survive because of those things that you had, but this next level for you is going to require something different.
Oh my gosh, that is so powerful. You just said this next level is gonna, we've maybe everything that we have, we're able to survive up to this far, but the next level is going to require something different. That's very powerful.
Yeah.
That's so
And,
powerful.
and it's a hard thing too, because there can be some grief around it, right? There can be some loss around it. Like, relationships may need to change, but when you are really comfortable with where you are and where you're going, you know, everything that needs to be there is going to be there. Everything that, should be there will be there. But you've got to have the faith for that. And that's one of those things that sometimes with trauma, you having that faith that things will work out may not be the beliefs that you have, because in the past things didn't work out. So letting go of something that feels kind of comfortable. So like, for example, when I decided I was willing to get divorced, right? I have been in my marriage for over 20 years, and there was lots of good reasons not to stay, but it was still what I had known all of my adult life. Am I willing to walk forward into this thing that I've never done before? Because I was married at 19. I don't know how to be a single adult at this point in my life. Am I willing to walk forward because I know that what's for me is there? There's a knowing when you get into that alignment that you just like, okay, now I'm not 100% sure what it's going to look like, but I know this is the right direction. And some people, unfortunately, especially with trauma, haven't ever felt that knowing yet. So they can't quite quantify it, because it's not something they've had an opportunity to experience, because they've been going on instinct and survival mode so long. So the coaching space can be so powerful to let people safely explore with someone who's not going to let you get hurt. That's a really good thing.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I believe in my as my journey has unfolded, it's been wild to me to realize all the modalities that exist.
Absolutely.
Whether you see a coach, a healer, a guide, whatever it is, but what you touched on, Calvalyn, about that inability to have faith because we all we know, all we are up to now is all of our learned experiences.
Absolutely.
And if you've learned that it's not going to work out well, then you know that it won't work out well. And when we're in that space, I love how you said that that's the value, that's the gift, that's the beauty of coaches, creating that safe environment, projecting that faith, and allowing that person to borrow your faith and your trust. Man, that's powerful.
It is. And I think for me, that even got amplified when I went back and got certified as a coach. So even though I could continue to practice in this country as a coach without it, I went back and I found the only trauma-informed coach that was, coaching program that was recognized by the ICF. And so I found that, and I was like, and I say this thanks to COVID, they had decided to offer this program from Canada virtually, that they had never offered virtually before. And so I was able to find it at that time. And it put me in communication with so many coaches that are different than me, that I never would have probably had an opportunity to meet had I not decided that that I was going to do this program. And what I loved is that they were coming from all these different spaces and saying, I keep running into trauma and I need to figure out what to do with it. I keep, I sometimes I can't quite pinpoint exactly what the trauma is because I'm not going to the past, but I keep running into what I really believe is trauma and nobody's showing me how to coach through it. I had to come to this program. I was like, yes. So there is this space. A lot of times people think that trauma can't be addressed during coaching, but it absolutely can, because so many of your beliefs and behaviors are rooted in trauma, that trauma can help, a trauma-informed coach really can help you unpack that and identify, I want to keep this behavior, but let this one go. I'm going to keep this belief, but that one's got to go, those kind of things. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity to have done that as well.
The first time I learned, or when I learned, the first time, I mean, when I learned, which was only about 2.5 years ago. I say the first, when I learned, it was so eye opening to me that our beliefs are, until we inventory them, they're just playing out unconsciously.
Yeah.
And when I learned that I can actually inventory and I don't have to keep these, it was the most powerful thing for me. It
Yeah.
was so powerful. And I like how you highlighted that, like, this one doesn't serve me.
Mhm.
Once upon a time, that belief served you.
Yeah.
When that belief took roots, you didn't know what you know today.
Absolutely.
That's so powerful. Okay, Calvalyn, if people wanted to reach out to you, do you still have availability for one-on-one clients?
I do. It's super limited, but I
Yeah,
do
yeah,
have some. Yeah, I do have some. And I do, what I'm doing a little bit more of now is like group coaching. So I do have some group
beautiful.
coachings. And I do, like, for people who are looking to like develop business skills and things like that, I do some masterminds. But yet they can definitely reach out to me on my website, and you have those links. And I am on social media too. So I definitely check my DMs there as well.
And what about, are you also taking on, is your business taking on more organizations for consulting as well right now?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. So I
And
love working with organizations.
And for everyone that's, if you're listening to this audio, you can check out the video on YouTube. The channel is Success After Trauma, and if you're watching us on YouTube, you can check out the audio while you're driving in the car. We're gonna have the links included. So if you've resonated with something you heard today, maybe you're an organization, maybe you're an individual, but you resonated with something you heard today and you want more, make sure you click that link. And Calvalyn, would you mind sharing, just for the people that are listening right now, what is the website where they can connect with you?
Absolutely. So it's my name, first and last, cavalynday.com. That's the easiest way. And I'm on social media at Cavalyn, pretty much anywhere, which is, my name sounds hard to say. It sounds a little scary, but it's really pretty simple. Calvalyn.
I have to talk about your name. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Names are so sacred. I've mispronounced your name twice. And yes, for everyone listening, if you look at Calvalyn's name, it is pronounced just the way it's spelled. So it's just me. Calvalyn, for those of you looking to connect with her on those social media platforms. Calvalyn, can you share, do you have any final words to share with those that are listening? Um, Maybe those that, actually, let me ask you this, Calvalyn, if you wouldn't mind, for your final thoughts. Would you share words to those that just realized, those that are listening, that just had the realization, I have trauma to process?
Such a good question. So first of all, you're safe right now where you are. The things that you have survived, you've already survived, and your best days can absolutely be ahead of you, even if there's going to be some hard, bumpy road to get there. So be open to the possibility of processing all of the past and what that can mean for your future, but know that the work that you are doing, whatever that looks like to get to the next step, will absolutely be worth it. 110%.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Calvalyn. Until the next episode, everyone, be great. It's already in you.